My name is Brian Addison. I've been a writer here in Long Beach for over 15 years. And I am joined by this amazing human right here. For those that don't know their work, Lauren Y.S. has a queer dude. Her work speaks to me on multiple volumes, and she has this beautiful way of not only showcasing her own Asian American heritage, but queerness, liminality, one of our favorite mutual words. And we're gonna hopefully explore that tonight. Lauren, do you wanna provide an intro?
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Lauren Y.S. I am a muralist, an artist, and practice person thing. There's a slideshow of a bunch of stuff that I do going on randomly in the background. I've been doing murals for 10 years. I am from Denver, Colorado. I like the color purple and unicorns, and feel free to ask me any questions at the end. I'm mostly interested in knowing what you want to know. But yeah, thank you so much, Long Beach, for having me. And I started painting murals with Powwow, walls. So I'm grateful to be here 10 years later, painting again.
Hell yeah. And Cassie, make sure you cut us off so that people, if they do have questions, we actually have time for that, because I know it's important to Lauren. So I'm just gonna get right into it. If you guys haven't had the chance to see their mural, it's over at Good Time Coffee over in the Zafaria district. And it is an ode to Everything Everywhere All at Once, Best Picture winner at the Oscars. And it's an ode to a very specific character in it. Now, you were a fan of this film before you even knew that you were actually a part inspiration for the very character you painted. Do you want to explain this really rad story?
Yeah. Even when I saw the preview for this film, I bawled through it. I was like, this is going to be something really important, mainly because the main character, Michelle Yeoh, I was like, that reminds me of my mom in like the 5 minutes that I saw it, and was like, this is going to be something really important. And I'm someone who's been calling for like Asian, Chinese main characters in film and like TV and animation for like years. And when I saw it, many of my friends felt like it was like the most seen I've ever felt in a movie before. Like seeing like a young queer Chinese character who was like in this psychedelic world with like butt plugs flying around and stuff. I was like, how did you do this? Like, who greenlit this film? And like, was it me? Like, and it just blew my mind. Like I wept through it. And I was freaking out about it online like everybody else. And like the Daniels messaged me, and they were like, so when we were writing the Jobu Tupaki character, the daughter, we hoped she would be as cool as some of your characters. And then my brain exploded onto the wall. And it was one of those moments where you're like, I guess that I'm in the world, and like we're in the world together, and these like people who are making amazing work aren't just like in this tower. We're all like here creating and like influencing each other. And also like if your work's on the street, people see it. You don't know who's gonna see it. And like as queer people too, like we're in a community together, whether you know it or not. And I think that our energies sort of reach out and touch each other. So it's just one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me. And so I really wanted to do a mural based off of that character to like sort of do this reverse like impressionistic thing of like, I'm now inspired by your character that was sort of slightly inspired by mine. So Jasper set that up, and oh yeah, and then the Daniels came to Hawaii, and I got to take them in the lift, and they came and helped us paint, and like we taught them how to tag. They tagged like little dicks on the wall, and like they were like, please cover this up, and me and Hyro were like, no, we're not covering them up. Like the Daniels did that, so they're like hidden in there. But yeah.
And I don't want to bring up like intramural space drama, but you were supposed to be originally at the Mark Twain, and you had a very ambitious proposal to do 12 faces, but you stuck to the 4 on Good Times wall. For those that don't know, Lauren freestyles. Like, there's no projection, there's no stenciling, and it's wildly beautiful to witness. Will you kind of explain to people how it's almost like an auto thing for you in your brain? Like, I think most people think of, when they're thinking of perspective and proportion, it's easier on a smaller scale, but for you, it's actually the opposite.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think a lot of muralists will agree with this. Over time, you start to realize that larger scale is actually easier to freehand because there's more room for error. weirdly enough. And because it's like this full body thing, you can actually get these sort of gestures in where with spray paint, whereas on a smaller scale, like doing tiny details is like actually really hard. And so I was like, I'm not sure if this is the right space to do what I wanted to do, but Serena helped me scale it down and be like, okay, I still really want to do this because it seems timely, and it's what I wanted to do. And that's the thing in mural festivals, like you, from the outside, you think this is all like set up and perfect, but there's like building owners and like city strictures and all these things that dictate where you end up. And so this often happens when you show up, you're like, sorry, you have to paint somewhere else. But you always got to work with the people who are working with you, Jasper. And I ended up painting at Good Time Coffee, which is a queer and trans owned and run coffee shop, which is perfect. And I was like, this is exactly where it's supposed to be. The whole ethos of the mural is about creating space for like queer acceptance. And so I was like, all right, this is perfect. And it was, I don't know, Joey's so amazing, brought me coffee all day, everything. Like, yeah, the vibes were great. So I'm happy it's up and done.
Really good coffee, by the way.
Yeah.
So go.
Go there.
I think this is the perfect segue to go into queerness. And forgive me, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my own life. So my dude, whom I love, was born in Jalisco, youngest of 13. And my adopted Mexican family has just introduced me to this whole new perspective on culture and identity. And what's been fascinating about going to Mexico and experiencing the difference between native Mexicans versus Mexican American experience is exploring indigenous Mexican culture. And when I was talking with Lauren, what I found fascinating is this domination of Western culture on so many of our indigenous cultures has eradicated gender identities and pluralism, coding us into a binary. So when I brought up like all these beautifully non-binary indigenous mythologies in Mexican indigenous culture, your research into your own heritage, which is Chinese, partially Chinese, you've discovered that in Chinese mythology, and you've tried to reflect this, there's also expressions of queerness through non-binary mythology. Please talk about that, because I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so cool that a lot of us are sort of doing this research and reclaiming our heritage in a way that makes you unearth all these things that are sort of gone unspoken. And if you really dig into Chinese mythology, there's a lot of stuff there, and you wouldn't think this like knowing about like contemporary China, but there's a lot of queerness that runs through our history, and it has to be. Queer people have existed forever. Like Chinese opera is queer as hell. Like we've been not cross-dressing, or like doing drag
not a
for
crime.
yeah, centuries, exactly. But there's a god in Chinese mythology called Tu Shen, who I'm really obsessed with, who's the rabbit god, but he's protector of the queers. And there's Guan Yin, who's my deity, who's gender fluid throughout time and like centuries and centuries. And like it's really cool to bring these up in your work, to tell people about them, and to remind people that within every culture there's like threads of queerness. And I think perhaps they have to be like palimpsests in through time, or like hidden or like coded, because of the way queer people have been persecuted through time. But I think it's really worth bringing those back up to this. And if you look at my installation at Meow Wolf, there's like an altar to Tu Shen. And I think we can like look to our transcestors, as I call them, to like learn more about what it means to be queer in an age.
I think this is actually the perfect segue into not just intersectionality, but also liminality for my straight folks in the audience. Queerness is not this simple like box that we can fit in, and has a gay white cis male. I have an extremely different experience than what Lauren and their experience is. And one of the most beautiful things I think happening right now in queerness is honestly people who look like me in the queer community not having the platform and not having, ironically, the microphone in this conversation. But to add further to their experience and why I love their artwork is the liminality. So liminality is this concept of in-between spaces, right? And so for Lauren, who's partially white, partially Chinese, all American, she's too American for Chinese folk, she's too Chinese for American folk, and she's not gay enough for the popular kids in the queer community, so then she's even further marginalized in the gay community. She doesn't fit they don't fit this specific box. Can you talk about straddling all these different identities and why art becomes a way for you to express them?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you brought up liminality. You were like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna be academic about this. I was like, I'm sorry, that's my favorite word. Yeah, liminality is this concept of the in-betweenness of something. And I specifically talk about it, I have for years, because of I like occupy so many half identities. And I think there's something really important about claiming that as its own identity, because we are all mixed. Like, we're all part something and part the other thing. If you're the child of immigrants, if you're like, everyone's going to be mixed in the future. And so I sense amongst mixed people this sense of like fear of claiming, but we're all feeling that, and that in itself is a huge part of that experience. And if you start to look at like the narratives that are coming out about Asian Americans, it's like Ocean Vuong's books or whatever. They're not books about us being like these like big white cowboys taking over the West, you know? It's about us being confused and trying to figure ourselves out, and that is an American narrative these days. And it's just as valid and perhaps more valid. And so I think what I'm trying to do is, and like with my room at Meow Wolf, it was like physically creating a space for people who are like half thing and half another. And like we have the chance now to claim that as our own, and like, you know, do the architecture within that room and tell everyone else about what that looks like. And it doesn't have to be this stable, heroic space. It can be questioning, and it can be feel unsafe. And that in itself is really beautiful. And I think like part of the reason I've been painting these sort of like half snake, half centipede characters for so many years was a way of trying to like visually encapsulate that idea. Like, you know, it started with Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto, where she talks about like the cyborg is sort of like half monster chimerical thing. And I think there's the reason people like identify with those characters is because they're like, oh yeah, I'm my body is sort of monstrous in a good way. Like trans people constantly talk about having like bodies that are other, and just claiming that instead of being like it's gross, because it's fucking awesome.
Well, and I don't think I actually had this conversation when we spoke. It actually came to me earlier today. You proudly identify as American, and it was so weird, and I know it sounds kind of dumb. It felt like strangely impactful to me that a queer, non-binary, mixed race person proudly identifies as American, and it's almost weird that that is a political statement nowadays. Can you talk about why it's important for queer people to own where they come from, rather than this kind of almost romanticized version of wanting to own their parents' heritage if they are like the children of immigrants or mixed race?
Yeah, and this is like a sort of a new thing for me, because I did, you know, none of us really like want to be American. It's like the flag is like kind of a bad word, you know? But I proudly identify as Asian American because because I have to. I'm only half Chinese. B, because I'm third generation. C, because my experience, like I focus on the Asian American experience, which means like what happened to Chinese people in Colorado or in Sacramento, because I didn't grow up in China. My mom didn't grow up in China. And so I feel like I do feel insecure about talking about it that way. And amongst my friends who are different like generations, like who are more newly immigrants or their parents came over, I try to listen more and like learn from each other about their experience as well. And we kind of like level each other out. And I have a lot of friends and like partners who are more like culturally Chinese or Japanese or whatever than I am, and we teach each other. But then I know more about like mythology and history and stuff because I kind of like compensate for my
Through the research,
Americanness,
right? Yeah.
through the research, because I have to do it for my work. And so there's no like, well, I'm more Asian than you, or like Lauren's not Asian enough. Like, can you help me learn this Chinese word, or how do I pronounce this kind of thing? Thanks, Rita. But yeah, I am American, you know? I'm Asian American. I think it's like, I can't run away or leave the country, although I wanted to sometimes. But I think it's important to just claim the thing you are and then make it cool.
Amen. I'm going to segue into your belief about, so you come from an academic background, you went to Stanford, but you have this kind of really beautiful perspective on why street art is important in terms of how it relates to the much more elevated gallery museum space, but how we need both to essentially function if we want to have art in our world. Will you elaborate more on that?
Sure. Hello? Oh, a lot of it is selfish. I love painting murals more than anything on the planet, and that's because sitting in a studio by myself makes me want to die. I love it, but it's like if I had to do that all the time, and nothing else, I would disappear. I would like go out of my body. Like I wouldn't get to meet all of you. I wouldn't get to be in the sun. I wouldn't get to like have the people driving by on the street, asking me if I want to take a ride. Like my life is really beautiful because I get to like be in all these different spaces as a human being.
There's some kids who
Oh yeah.
they literally painted this kid's skateboard. He stopped by and he was like, "Will you paint my skateboard?" And you got $20.
Yeah, they gave me $20. I was like, when I'm dead, you can sling this for a lot of money. And they were like, are you famous like that? I was like, no, but I will be when I'm dead. Like that wouldn't happen. But there's this like humane component of what we do that like I would be really upset if I like got like if I moved past it in my head. And you forget that like our purpose as muralists is to just like bring beauty to the world and like limit people's suffering. Like you forget, because our lives are so cool, that like sometimes if you just walk past like a mural, sometimes it's the best thing that happened to that person that day. And I think it's important to do murals for free. Like you shouldn't have to, but like to remember that like you're not, any better than the people who are walking past it. Like if you see this truck that I painted in Mexico, I was with Nichos painting trucks for no reason in Mexico, and he said something really cool. It was like, I think it's important to remember to do stuff like this because these people don't care. They didn't ask for the mural. We were just like, can we paint this? And they're like, yeah, I guess so. And then also trucks can't gentrify. You paint it and they leave. And it's really cool to do something that's completely like unconnected to like the things that gentrify neighborhoods or make money. Just to like remember what you're doing within the human community.
On that note, street art is known for being ephemeral, right? Like the whole point is that that it's not going to be there forever. And if it gets tagged or overwritten, it's almost kind of a compliment in a sense because it's like, it's the well, yeah, but with things like Long Beach Walls or formal mural festivals, are artists becoming more frustrated that this piece could not last and they kind of want it to linger? In a sense, that kind of is the antithesis of street art's whole ephemerality.
I think it's an individual thing. When I was younger, I would take it personally, and then you just paint a lot more, and then you realize that it just happens. And then also, like, if you paint graffiti, you start to understand, like, yeah, there's a reason this got tagged. I kind of went over somebody, okay. And like, it depends on the city that you're in and like the neighborhood that you paint in. And sometimes, like when I just painted in Montreal, they were like, your shit's gonna get capped like immediately. And I was like, okay. And then it really did, like 2 days later. And I walked past and I was like, oh, okay. I knew it. But then you're like, yeah, whatever. Like, I knew that. And it's like, it's not personal. Like my piece here, my first piece in Long Beach got tagged during the George Floyd protest, not because of any political reason, but because the streets were mobbed and the kids went wild. And I left it there for years because it was like a relic of what had happened, and I thought it was really cool. I fixed it later on, but like it's just part of it. If you get butthurt about your stuff getting capped, you shouldn't be painting murals. Like you just go paint another one, do it better.
Would this make you venture more into doing gallery art? Do you have like a deep attachment to the gallery still? Yes, you love murals, and that is most certainly, I would say, probably your largest passion, but would you ever segue into the art world, like galleries wise?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing gallery shows consistently through my career. I haven't gone as hard on it because it's like, it's really draining for me. But I think it's really important. Galleries are really important for like, they're tastemakers, like anyone can go to galleries. We all go hang out, see each other. And then also having a body of work like per year or other year is like, is what people are going to look at when you're dead. It's like, and it's really important to make paintings. I'm finally like after a year of like having a broken brain, getting back to paintings I wanted to make since the pandemic, and it feels really good. I just like can't. You just have to. I was like, I gotta go to Long Beach so I can get my hands on some spray paint because I've been in the studio for like a month. And I think a healthy art career, both things happening with other stuff.
I think this is the beautiful segue to open it up to the audience because I would love to know what questions they have for Lauren.
What piece was that? You talking about your first piece?
Oh, the first piece in Long Beach. It's across from Wingstop. It's like a long, tall, yeah, yeah.
I hadn't realized that it was tagged.
Yeah. It was fun.
Not anymore, though, apparently.
I fixed it for, yeah, after a few years.
How do you feel about that? I have mixed feelings about that. And I would hope when the city sponsors events like this and bring in internationally known artists to do work, if they actually, you know, maintain that work and protect it, and so that it can last.
Yeah, actually, Long Beach Walls is amazing. They actually did, it got tagged a couple times, and they fixed up the first one that was in like the black background, and then I think they left the stuff that was in the frog because it was hard to render that stuff out. And I was amazed because that doesn't happen all the time. It was really nice that they fixed it up, but I came back. It was good that I had to fix it because I had to make like a video for something. And then, yeah, it was cool because I have a friend who teaches kids out here, and they always take the kids over to like look at the mural, and they write little papers about the mural, and I get to read them sometimes. But oftentimes, like that tag was used as a part, like a way to talk about the uprisings, and so I just thought it was really cool. Yeah.
Didn't you have a friend whose kid wrote an essay on that mural?
Yeah, this is the same person who worked with Powwow for a long time, and they like from time to time this person sends me the kids like essays about it, and sometimes they have crazy ideas about the mural, and I'm like, that's sick. That's totally what it's about. Yeah, that's a really good question. I do feel pressure when people give me references for ideas. It doesn't happen often, but I think it's really cool to have directives, especially if it's because it's something that's important to the community. For example, I'll talk about the wall I did at Yale at the Asian American Community Center. That was like a huge prompt. It was like, how do we create an image that encapsulates the entire history of this space and all of the Asian American diaspora in one image? And I was like, not sleeping. But my answer to that was like, can I have can I have conversations with the community to talk? I don't live in New Haven, and so that turned out really, really, really well. I had a lot of conversations with students, community members, like professors, and then I learned a lot about like the history of the space that I didn't know before. And from that, I kind of cogitated and put something together. And it was a lot of work. It was really, really intense. And then I gave up a lot of like my strictures surrounding what I thought it should look like. And especially when you're doing work where you're portraying people of a certain race, it's really complicated. I feel really comfortable painting like Chinese looking characters, but they really wanted me to channel like the South Asian like character. And I was like, I would love to do that. Am I allowed to do that? And they were like, we would like you to do that. And so we had talks about what kind of like facial structures, what kind of textiles, kind of things express like and celebrate this culture. And that was the setting in which I felt comfortable doing that. And it was real. I grew a lot through that process, but I wouldn't go and do that necessarily on my own. So I would just say it's a big like ego trip thing, not like the opposite, where you're just like, I'm gonna put away what I want to look at and be like, you're a channel, you're an antenna for someone else's ideas at that point.
You even brought up when we were talking about you not knowing Long Beach and you wish you had more time to understand the community that is Long Beach. Is that always a struggle, like visiting a city? Because I can't imagine as an artist traveling around the world, you just have all this time to spare to get to invest. But if you do, like, how do you go about doing it? Is it eating? Is it hanging out with people? Is it looking at other art? Like, how do you get to know a community that you're not a part of?
That's a great question, and I'm finally getting good at this now after so many years. And I will make time to stay in a city and figure it out if I really like the vibe. I did this in Montreal, but it's like, get a tattoo, find out if there's kink events happening, eat the food, get recommendations from those people. And it's not easy all the time, but like I love checking out the kink community in different cities. It says a lot about what the spaces are like. And then like I just got recs from Joey about like which, like lesbian bars to go to or whatever. And I didn't know Long Beach like was this queer. I've only been here to paint murals, so I think it's
Queer
super
spot,
important.
girl.
Yeah, I can tell now. It's all explains all the rainbows. Yeah, sure. I feel really lucky that by and large the reaction is really positive. I think people are just like always excited to see you in like something crazy going on in the street, and they're like, "Oh, you're like making art on the spot," or they're like, "Are you making art, or is that person making the art?" And you're like, "I'm the one physically making the art right now." So yes, I'm making it. Yeah, I think people just really love like big, colorful stuff. And even if they're like perplexed by it or confused, it makes them stand there and like say like ask what's going on. I don't think I've had some trouble. Ironically, like when there's a piece in Peru that I painted, which is like a big pink wall with like two characters, and I called it Hermandad, which means sisterhood. But I was there and I heard all the like it's like a smaller neighborhood in Peru, and I heard them because I speak Spanish. I heard them talking about it, and they were like really upset because they thought I was painting lesbians, and I was like, in this one instance, I'm actually not painting lesbians, and I can hear what you're saying. And I felt really bad because I didn't want to like offend anyone. But then there's this big conversation, and I was younger then, so then I realized they were like, "We brought you here so that your work would like open people's minds," and that was like a big learning thing where it was like, "Don't feel bad about what you're doing. If your heart's in the right place, it's good for the community."
Queer to queer, have there been any places where you felt uncomfortable with what you were painting, but you knew you had to do it?
That's a really good question. I don't think so. I don't think I've ever been like, I don't know.
More or less about the place and more about the piece itself.
I think in my earlier years, I was always a little bit insecure about what I was doing. And I was like, am I allowed to do this? Should I be doing this? Is this going to upset people? Like I painted a big queer orgy at my old house at Stanford one time, and they definitely painted over that. But I was like, they need this. You deserve this.
Everyone deserves a good orgy every night.
But I feel really lucky. I think that that's something that's important about having a platform where it's like, all right, there's someone out there who's going to do this big gay stuff, and luckily, like I've done enough of it where I think people are like, okay, that's what they're going to do. Like, let them do it, and it paves the way for other people to do stuff like that. Hopefully.
Now, for me, queer writers were a huge influence in me becoming a writer. And then when you and I talked, you wanted to be a writer. Could you talk to all the amazing queer people out there about how many different mediums you went through before you even got to being a muralist, and provide them some inspiration to explore themselves in that sense?
Sure. Yeah, well, I went to college. I majored in art and creative writing, and I wanted to do graphic novels initially because I was like, this is the greatest way to synthesize these two skills. And then I realized that you got to sit on your butt for like ever, drawing the same thing over and over. And I was like, as a 22-year-old coming out of college, I was like, I don't do that. And also, it's so hard, to sit down and do that. And then like, I just wanted to be outside, and I saw someone painting a mural and was like, that's what I want to do right now. And I'm young enough that if I do it and I screw it up, then I can pivot, And I never knew that 10 years later I could still be doing this, honestly. So it's kind of like, this is kind of a shot in the dark. But now 10 years later, I'm kind of like, there's so much narrative in my work. I'm thinking about how do I turn back around and start weaving the narrative back in, go back to writing. But I think it's a lesson to anyone just about like doing whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it. Like Yayoi Kusama didn't start making art. She didn't leave Japan until she was 30, Like, it doesn't matter how old you are. If there's a thing you want to do, if you put enough years into it, like really hardcore, you're going to get somewhere. And I think it's a really cool lesson. As someone, I have a decade of work under me, and now I'm like, what else do I want to do on top of this? And it's really scary because I feel like a baby, but I'm going back towards I'm actually, going to be writing stuff in the next year. So, and I feel like you're a writer. I'm like, how do I do it? Teach me, it's good to feel like a baby sometimes.
Do you think there's ways for artists like writers and muralists to better intermingle and better coexist and better uplift each other to find ways to, showcase for our sense the queer community?
This is a really cool question. We should figure that out. I think
Let's do it.
Right? Don't you think like some kind of graphic novel that was like, all the images were made up of all all of the murals that you'd done would be really cool. Like I had this prompt to do recently where I was like sort of prompted to create sort of the skeleton of a narrative where all the murals that I had done had been like screenshots of different episodes. And sitting down to do that, I was like, oh, I have so much cool stuff to talk about. And so maybe that's something that we're turning towards in the future. Or like, if you wrote a piece where I was inspired by like these 3 murals or something, it would be so cool to see like what sort of synesthetic qualities your writing brought out about the thing that the person had painted.
Well, and we actually talked about like Everything Everywhere All at Once almost felt graphic novel-ish in its whole entailing. And then I asked you what you thought about AI because I'm finding it so fascinating that some people are seeing it has this like detriment, right? Like that it's just one of the worst things to happen and it's going to ruin human creativity. But I see it as a tool. And you kind of agreed. And I think this like evolution of art, the irony with Everything Everywhere All at Once is that it couldn't be made in the 90s. There's no way with the technology that they had back then that it could have even been created. So would you like to like elaborate on your hopes for using tools and ways to keep art simultaneously authentic and human, but also keeping up with the times?
I haven't actually used AI that much. That conversation really made me want to try. And I'm gonna rip off the Daniels answer here because they answered this question in Hawaii, because their answer made me feel more confident about what AI is gonna do. And Daniel Kwan was talking about how he thinks that the proliferation of AI will allow us to, as like really like old school medium artists, to have the process be even more valuable. So as someone who freestyles everything, perhaps that process will become even more valuable because your common layperson can just sit down and make something with the click of a button or whatever. And I was like, I really hope so. I don't think anyone should stop making art with AI. It's really cool. But as people who really like slave in the sun to do things, or like over the typewriter, whatever, like I think it's important. Yeah, right? Like I think that should be really valued because it's the process itself is like, why would I freehand things if I wanted to get to the end process immediately? It's being out there in the sun, like freaking it like dizzy, painting this thing that I love the most. I'm never gonna give that up. So hopefully that happens. But also I should use AI more. It would save me from a lot of bad relationship conversations that I've had.
Well, I believe I know how you're going to answer this question, but I've always said I really don't feel humans will ever become fully disconnected from inherently human things. I talked to you about writing. I don't think people are going to ever get over reading. I could be naive in that sense. Do you also believe people are never going to get over someone creating physically art?
I did have this moment where I was like, oh man, like all this AI art that I'm seeing is so cool. It's like these chicks with jellyfish on their heads, like perfectly lit, blah, 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 which is like these perfect renditions of ideas that I had when I started making art, just like perfectly done. I'm like, that's so cool. Damn it. Like what happens when there's just like this ubiquitous like wash of like cool images that we can access at a blink? Like, will it be less? People are just desensitized to cool images, and that sort of freaked me out. And it makes me think that the stuff that's like, I was like, maybe my style will actually go back towards like more like primitive in that way, or like it'll be less perfect or like well lit or whatever. But we're never gonna not need art. I think it's just like it's a challenge. The robots are a challenge for us to figure out how to make things cool or like redefine cool.
And forgive me for the segue. So I was talking to the guy who developed the Anti-Mall down in Orange County. And it was this space that was developed in the early 90s. Like back then, it was like the Virgin record stores, Walden Books, all that shit. And he wanted something that was like antithetical to that. So that's where like Urban Outfitters and those type of brands were like birthed, right? And he's been working on this development in Long Beach, and I found his discussion of the idea of being cool so fascinating. So he basically said that the internet killed cool, and here's why. And he was like, so back then, in order to access culture, everything from records to your clothes, you had to be in a geographical location, right? So you had to be at an epicenter of a city, and that's why so many queer kids or kids from small towns who don't fit in move to cities. It's because there's a culture there that fits them. And he was saying that he was in Utah on vacation and ran into this 9-year-old kid who he said had the best style ever, dressed on point, head to toe. His taste in music was impeccable. And then he realized this kid has access to all that instantaneously. There is no need for a geographical location in order to see a picture online, find out that look, buy it, have it shipped to them in the middle of Utah. And now with Spotify, you have an endless amount of access to music. So he called it the death of cool. But here's what's funny. I think it's actually modified it all. And what we've now experienced is that everyone has a sense of cool to them. It's just all about accessibility. Do you think art can eventually meld that accessibility to where it's not a constant replication like what you're talking about, that we won't hit this point where we're inundated with images that are redundant, but that it'll actually become the opposite where people are actually just expressing themselves?
Yeah, I kind of hope so, but I feel like there's this, like, we're our own little microcosm, the art world, where I'm talking about cool is like so hard to define. What I think is cool is like sort of obviously cool in this weird way, but like there's this, I have a lot of friends who've like pivoted from making what they were painting like 10 years ago to like, they're like, you know what I think is cool? Shapes, a field of grass, which is fucking cool, and it totally is. And I think that's the cool thing about art, where it's just like, whatever you think is the thing that's going to occupy your brain the most to paint, someone else thinks that's cool. Or if you think the anti-cool is cool, you just kind of get to decide. And I'm like, yeah, I might like wake up and be like, screw this. I don't want to paint cool stuff anymore. Like, what I think is cool is painting rocks, but I would be ripping off Johnny. I will paint rocks someday. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like it's so impossible to like navigate that, but we'll see what happens.
And forgive the art history majors in the room if I mess this up, but like, I also feel like there's no longer style. Now, forgive, like what I mean by that is there's no longer these dominating movements, right? Like I don't want to say postmodern, postmodern, but like I don't think there is a modern anything, or I don't think there's a dominating aspect that is recreating art. I think one of the coolest things about living in now, and I think this is the proliferation of the internet, which is the proliferation of images, is that every style is cool. We've now discovered that every single type of architecture, type of clothing, type of music is cool. Do you agree with that, or do you think that art does have some say in what the zeitgeist is dealing with aesthetically?
I mean, it depends. I suppose there has to be stuff that's not cool for things to be cool. There's definitely stuff that I don't think is cool at all.
Such as?
Like being homophobic? I don't know. I'm confused about what we're talking about anymore. Does anyone have a question? Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something about like, coming into yourself as a young artist where you're like, in the beginning, I was like, I don't want to shoot myself in the foot because I'm doing like activist work or like making like, because my work is considered sort of like risky in a lot of places, and I'm sure there's lots of countries that don't invite me to paint out not because they don't like my work, but they're because like my work wouldn't necessarily fit in that community. And as an artist who wants to get around the world and see these countries and to the communities, I'm kind of like, do I need to paint the giant squid orgy on the thing with all the time, like? But then at the same time, it's important. Like my work changed so much during the like George Floyd period of time and the Stop Asian Hate period of time, because I was quiet before that. Not quiet, but like I was like, I really feel like I need to do something. Like I need to. And it was like this huge like, totally. And all of a sudden I'm in a place where I actually have like a wall that I can say something on. And I'm really grateful for that, because it made me feel like what I do actually is important. And it was, like at the time, in this very small way that felt like little things feel big when we're under attack. And so I think it's part of being a good activist or muralist, I'm learning, is knowing when it's time to say something and when you do have power, even if it's small. And when it's a good time to be like to rile people up or to be like a firebrand or whatever. So you're totally right. I don't want to just make pretty things for people to look at. There are good times to say things, and yeah, it's just knowing in your gut when it's time to do stuff like that. Sure. I was talking about this earlier. I've always looked up to artists like Swoon and Faith 47 and Aiko and like Indecline, really like Indecline, artists who are doing like sort of like risky stuff. And I always really wanted to look at femme artists, because there are a lot less of us in the scene. And like Swoon was, building all these boats that go through the Venice like pathways or whatever. And Swoon's queer, and Hera from Harakoot, like I love those artists, and I'm so lucky to actually get to know them as I get older. But it is true, like there weren't that many femme artists to look up to when I was younger, and so I think it's important to like kind of carry that torch. But I will say like cool, like amazing, like femme, queer, Asian, like people of color artists pop up every single day. Like Stevie came out of nowhere. And Stevie's fucking awesome. And it's so exciting to get to see people like bloom and come out of the woodworks and be like, can I paint, and it's really, really exciting. Yeah, and I think we just like keep growing and keep helping each other out, and like you don't think about competition. Like I think that's, in the beginning I was really competitive, but that's just because I was really young, and now it's just like, oh, I get to like work with these artists. It's so cool, and share the space. And yeah, good question. Doris, the slideshow is from like a different thing, so I normally probably wouldn't have put that in there. But I'm a really shitty tattoo artist. Budding shitty tattoo artist, just so you know. I did some tattoos on a boat in Seattle recently. Just being honest. I started learning during the pandemic because I really, I think as a visual artist, you start to get antsy. You're like, okay, my favorite hobby is now my job. Sometimes I hate doing it. What do I do to offset that feeling? Move into different mediums. And tattooing is obviously a huge part of my life. My partner's a tattooer. And I just want to be able to do, I don't charge for them. I'm still learning, but I like being able to give things to people. It's like more of an energy exchange for me. I always wanted to be a tattoo artist before, when I was in college. Like that was kind of my dream. Then I realized that you have to do like customer service, which I'm like bad at. But I want to get better at it. NFTs, I call them Nelly Furtados. I don't understand them. I am afraid of them. I think they're probably bad for the environment. I kind of want them to go away. I'm glad a lot of people made money. I was like, I hope this doesn't become a big thing because I can't wrap my head around it. I don't, Nelly Furtado.
And this will be my last question, unless anyone else has questions after this as well. You talked about you stepping outside of either the redundancy of what you do on the day-to-day, and then also stepping outside your comfort zone or your comfort being disrupted. How would you let other artists or other creatives know how to step outside their comfort zone to find a new space of creativity without something as traumatizing as BLM movement or Stop Asian Hate movement? So not something that abrupt in getting you to understand that you were in a comfortable zone. How do you do it on the day-to-day, the regular?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like, feels a little bit trite, but like, I remember it took me like 5-6 years to even feel comfortable like posting something on Instagram, because it is it's open to the world then. Like it ramps up your brain, and you get all nervous, and then you worry about what people are gonna say, and like it took me years to get used to just like not letting it get to me, whether it had a good response or whatever. And I hate that, but it is the way we access the world in an immediate way. And I went through this whole period where I was literally doing whole art shows that were just drawings of like squid orgies. And I thought it was really like provocative at the time, which it was, but it was like, I was like, oh, I'm making like crazy sex art. I'm going through my Kiichi Tanami phase or whatever, and it freaked me out. I was like, oh my god, is everyone gonna hate me? Like, what's gonna happen? And posting those pieces like got me used to being like, oh, it's okay to do this. Nobody's gonna come like beat me up, or like I'm not gonna get uninvited from things. But also I might get invited to things because I do that, and then you can pigeonhole yourself with that, be like the sex art guy or whatever. But it's just good to like make that stuff, see what it feels like making it, see what it feels like putting it into the world and talking to people about it. After a while, I got sick of talking about it. I was like, oh, I'm really like digging the knife in here, you know? And then I look back on them and I'm like, that was a fun time. That was a fun time. Maybe I'll go back. But just try it in the privacy of your room and then like put it out there. Everything you do is going to become an era of yours. You don't have to stay in it. You can leave anytime, and then you can look back on it and be, the most freeing thing is looking back at your old work and be like, oh my God, you know, I'm glad I'm over that, but I had to do that to get somewhere else. And like, now that I feel comfortable making like art that talks about sexuality, it's like, I did that, and now how can I mature it and turn it into something else, or like take what I want from it and like leave the rest. You just have to do it. And then don't feel bad if there's a weird response or anything. Like, you'll forget about it in a few months. Everyone forgets about everything immediately. That's a good lesson I learned from Rabbi. People forget things so fast, you know? We just grow, move on.
So make more art, damn it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's it.
Well, it was a genuine pleasure. I hope you guys enjoyed our discussion tonight. If you have
Thank
any
you.
questions, obviously feel free to approach either one of us.
Thank you so much.